Here with Alex Winley and Austin Roblard. I am Ian Hest. And guys, this past weekend, a little bit of an interesting activity in terms of how the goalkeeping situation is concerned for Inter Miami. Nick Marsman, who was the number one when we began this year, going down to Inter Miami 2 and starting for them in their game against Rochester, a 2-1 win this past weekend. So that brings up the question. He is still signed through 2023 to a senior roster deal that's worth about $475,000 a year, which is a lot of money to pay for a goalkeeper in an international roster slot that he takes up. Those are come in very handy when you want to make new signings. And now Drake Callender, who is a homegrown player, and we'll have our own contract discussion about him coming in, establishing himself as one of the best goalkeepers in all of MLS. Wanted to talk about what the situation is regarding Nick Marsman. So, Austin, I guess we'll start there with just the nuts and bolts of his contract situation, paying nearly $500,000 for a guy who's going to be starting in your MLS Next Pro team. We'll see if that goes beyond this past week, but how that might be a difficult situation moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think what happened this weekend and what's happened all year kind of speaks volumes to the goalkeeping situation is that Drake Callender has played out of his mind, especially in the beginning of the year. We talked so much about how much he saved Inter Miami, and the defense was cracking at times, and Drake Callender was the one making those saves. And then you look at what the backup situation is and where Nick Marsman plays into this, because when he came here, let's be honest, we were all very high on Nick Marsman. I was calling him Neuer-esque, and I was saying things about him that, he plays really well with his feet. His distribution is good. They even put some game plans around him and his long ball ability. So there's a lot to be said for that and the kind of ability that he has. Now, he hasn't played in some time. And now that he got minutes with the second team, you're almost 100% surely now. If it wasn't sure 10 weeks ago, it's 100% sure now Drake Callender is going to finish the year, if healthy, and go into the playoffs, if healthy, and if they make it, as the number one. Do you, as a club, take a $475,000 contract and an international roster spot for a backup goalkeeper with any logistics in mind going into next year? I would say the answer is no. And for the contract that they gave him at the time, like we said, it seemed like a good deal. You didn't know that Drake Callender was going to come out and have this resurgence. So for me, it's now you need to assess the situation. Can Nick Marsman be the guy to battle Callender? Is it worth $475,000 to push Callender as a starter and have that goalkeeper competition? It's all about what the front office is going to want from their goalkeeping unit. And I think for now, they're in a situation where they just got rid of Diop, right, for some allocation money. You have to look within the league and look at this contract and say, who's really going to want this? There's obviously a lot of goalkeeping around the league that has been shaky, and it's always been like that in MLS. And if you have a Nick Marsman type, a guy who's proven ability, especially in 2021, and this year not so much, but you have to start weighing your options. And I think that's where Inter Miami are going to get caught up.
Yeah, and I think just looking at their form as well, Austin, you went to go watch Inter Miami CF2 the other day. And, there were times where Nick Marsman was a bit shaky, honestly. And like you guys said, paying that much money for a backup keeper and maybe in a different league that's not MLS, that's okay. But in MLS, you really need to penny pinch, especially with Inter Miami's position with the sanctions. They need as much money as they can. And with Drake Callender, being one of the top keepers in MLS statistically, Marsman has fallen by the wayside. And I think Henderson will take that into account. And, I don't think Miami's just going to offload Nick, send him wherever. I think, looking at some of the other players that have left and went into different situations, Lewis Morgan, Julian Carranza, they're going to send Nick, if they do offload him, to a place that's going to be beneficial for him. They're not just going to, bin him and, that's it. So we take that into account. I think if he does leave, it'll be for the right situation for Nick. And I think with Callender, I do think Neville has his trust in Drake, and he's a young player and he's still growing. And keepers can play until they're 40, so Miami may very well have their starting keeper for the next 10 years if it goes that way. So Yeah, there's just a lot of variables right now, but I think bottom line, you don't want your backup keeper on that much money, especially in MLS, and especially when you have a young keeper who has been playing better than said backup keeper. Yeah, difficult decision will have to be made this offseason, but just based off of the roster building now, I think Henderson and Neville will do the right job.
Yeah, so what we're talking about the money, and you could hear 475,000, not really know how much that plays into where a goalkeeper is paid compared to the rest of the league. That's the 12th highest paid goalkeeper in all of MLS. So that's similar to your Stephen Fry's, your Alex Bonos, not quite where Sean Johnson or Bill Hamid are making near the top. That's more like 700, 800,000 that those guys are on. But it still is in that upper echelon in terms of a roster hit, because it is a senior roster spot. All of that money counts towards the 4.9 million salary cap. Now, you're probably using general allocation money to offset some of that. But in an instance where you have Drake Callender, who's on 130,000, and we can sort of talk to him here. That deal is also a homegrown contract. Now, what does that mean? It means that by Drake playing for what was then Fort Lauderdale, he then does, and now being on the supplemental, we're going to get in a little bit of the weeds here. He's in the supplemental 29 and 30 roster spot allocation there. By him having that designation, that 130,000 counts as $0 towards the cap for Inter Miami this year. Whereas where Marsman's every single penny, because it's technically not 475, it's like $474,996, right? So every single one of those dollars is going to count towards the salary cap. And I think that's really where it becomes difficult, because Marsman's 2023 is going to be the last year that Nick Marsman is under contract for Inter Miami from that initial one. So you sort of have to look at it in terms of, can we restructure this that reflects more of a backup situation? Can we trade this for assets a la Diop, like we were talking about earlier? Or is this a clean split because you're going to need to use that money to pay Drake? Because if you start to pay Drake above a certain amount, no longer can you use him in that supplemental 29 and 30. You need to make him a senior roster. And now all of a sudden that 130, well, if that becomes 300,000, now if it's a senior roster spot that he's taking up, all of a sudden Drake's number comes against the cap. And now you sort of have to manage those. So one sort of goes with the other as we're analyzing this. I want to make sure that we don't lose sight of that.
Yeah, and I think almost all of it, a huge part of it, has to do with Drake's contract ending at the end of this year. And there's no doubt in my mind other MLS teams are going to be very interested in his services. I don't think he qualifies as a regular MLS free agent yet because he hadn't played in the league long enough.
No.
But at the same time, he's going to be out of contract. Miami will have the dibs on him and all of that good stuff. But if somebody's willing to pay more than Miami is, why wouldn't Drake take that deal? Why wouldn't Drake take a deal where he's paid more money and promised a first team spot, promised a starting spot, and obviously try and make his way up to maybe even a national team spot one day? He needs the playing time right now as a 24-year-old and a 25-year-old. He's in the prime of his career. I think Miami are going to be more and more willing as time has gone on. They are going to be extremely willing to give him a deal that suits what he wants and to give him playing time, because he's proven to them that he is worthy enough of that. He's proven to them that he can save them in so many different scenarios, and he has done that. He's a huge reason as to why this team is successful. I don't think we talk about it enough, to be quite honest with you. So the biggest thing on this is, can they give Drake the deal that he wants? And does Nick Marsman need to be offloaded to make that deal happen? Do you have a certain, in their minds, they want to spend a certain amount of number on a goalkeeper? And with right now, with what's happening with Drake in this homegrown deal, it's not being counted towards the cap. But going into next year, I'm assuming if it's not necessarily an extension, then it's probably going to be away from the homegrown deal. That might go away, and you're going to end up having to pay him more money. If you have to pay him, let's say $230,000 or $250,000, then you're spending $725,000-ish on a goalkeeping unit that you're mostly playing one of them anyway. What's really the point there? And that's where it comes down to, is, can you actually afford to spend $475,000 on a backup keeper, given the sanctions, which, yes, you have mitigated for the most part, but you need to be smarter with your dollars?
Well, I think, and I don't think you can. And let's remember Drake is a California boy. There is a chance that Jonathan Bond at LA Galaxy, he's making 475. So he's making the same as Marsman right now. So I think it's pretty easy to sort of when you start. I know we've thrown a lot of numbers out here. Marcinkowski in San Jose is at 300. So there's a little more. You're starting to see where these levels come in. But I guess the question is, how do you resolve the Marsman situation? Because you almost need to solve Marsman before you can approach Drake with the contract. And there's where I think a little bit of the issue is going to come, Alex, because the timing of this is going to matter. That you can't pay Drake until you figure out what you're doing with Marsman, right? Because then, like Austin was saying, you just had this huge amounts that you're dedicating to the salary cap just in one specific position. And that's not even to mention that you have CJ Dos Santos, who I think that, I at least I think that he's performed well when I've seen him at times this year. And so you have a situation there where the Marsman situation needs to be resolved first, is I guess where I'm going with this. And then once that's there, then we can sort of go down to Drake. The problem with that is if you can't solve that with Marsman, you're almost handcuffed by that. And that is where it gets cagey with Drake.
I will say that Drake Calendar may have some loyalty to Inter Miami. We posted a video on the Heron outlet with him with a Heron pendant around his neck after the Toronto win. So I do think Drake may be inclined to stay in South Florida just because of that loyalty to the club. And you guys bring up valid points, but realistically, I'm trying to think which MLS team really needs a starting 24-year-old keeper at the moment that will give him consistent minutes. Maybe.
Well, Chicago's always willing to.
Yeah, but they've got
somewhat.
generational keepers always coming through their pipeline. So, I don't know. And the California point is a really good one. He's from that area, and maybe if San Jose comes knocking, I don't know, who knows, but it depends. But I do think Drake will probably be inclined to stay in Miami just because of that loyalty. And like you guys said with Marsman, it just all depends on where he goes. And yeah, it's all money related. And it's just, one lever needs to lever some, we're not talking about Barcelona, but one lever needs to be activated before, you can move certain pieces, not money wise, but just, this puzzle levers. You can't move this guy without moving the other. So yeah, it's entirely dependent on what happens this offseason. But right now that's far away. We have playoffs and other things to focus on. But it'll be interesting come, January, February, how that happens.
The other thing too, though, that Nick does deserve a lot of praise for is he has handled this situation very well. You go in training and you hear they get along very well. They push each other a lot. And you could say that a lot of Drake's improvement has been to the goalkeeping coaching, which I think has been fantastic. And part of that also to Diop, and also that of Nick Marsman helping him along. Those guys are standing post to post with each other. What are you seeing? And they start practice taking, receiving the set piece balls will be swung in. They're always communicating with each other. So I think that the relationship that these guys have makes this more of a mature conversation that we're able to have with it, makes it more of an understanding of the business aspect of it and where guys could fit, as opposed to, any drama that might. I don't think that that's the case at all here, that there is no drama with it. It's strictly what's best for each individual player in the club.
Yeah. I just think it all depends really. Marsman has been great when he came in last season, and now Drake, that's what Miami wants to be about. They want to be about the young players coming through, whether they're from the academy or just, acquired through other means. They want young players playing. So, and Marsman's still a great guy, great goalkeeper. Maybe he moves within the league. We don't know, but, bottom line, you cannot be paying your backup goalkeeper that much for him to not play, essentially.
The roster freeze date is September 2nd. That's when the rosters across the entire league and the designation will be set for the 2022 season. Again, this is a conversation probably that will be more for the off season and what goes on there. But we'll see how this goes really into next year and beyond, if they can figure out what is going on with the goalkeeping situation here in Miami. For the time being, Inter Miami does have a top 10 goalkeeper in Drake Callender, one of the best this season as they make this playoff push for the 2022 season. Make sure you follow the Heron Outlet on YouTube, on Instagram, on Twitter. Like, share, subscribe, rate, review, and we'll see you back here soon.